shadows stayed. My heart grew cold, my spirit weak, but deep inside I heard you speak. You are the one who leads me home, no longer lost, I'm not alone.
Greetings. My name is Dina Lafargue, and I welcome you to the latest episode of The Drip Line. Today's episode addresses the victimization of the victim and the importance of forgiveness. It's so very serious, and it's on my heart because I have lived it, and I know it hurts. It's called victim blaming. It is unnecessary, and it happens far too often. In this episode, I will address the science behind victim blaming. I will define PTSD and how we can overcome it. Women who are victims of any criminal act or any form of violence or abuse do not need to suffer additional layers of victimization by onlookers, by the public, by media, or by family or friends. Meaning women who have been victimized and are victims do not need to bear any additional burden by being judged. It's heartbreaking. It's damaging. It's almost criminal. And it only contributes to the pain the victim is suffering. It only contributes to the drama and to the trauma. I myself have been a victim more than once in my life. The most traumatic event was being carjacked and shot at a gas station in Miami by a neo-Nazi skinhead who had just been released from prison. He actually tried to kidnap me, but I wasn't having it. The fight had to take place right then and there. Well, he ended up shooting me. It was a point-blank range shot with a .38 caliber gun right to my abdomen, and I practically bled out. But as God would have it, I was saved by a phenomenal team of doctors at Jackson Memorial Hospital in Miami, and I will never ever forget Dr. Christina Robu, who was integral in performing the surgery that saved my life. God bless her. Anyway, the news channels blamed me for fighting off my attacker. It was unreal. It was painful. I couldn't believe it. But of course, why not? Instead of just handing over my car, they said, I should have known better. But you see, they didn't know my story. They didn't know how it started. They didn't know that he had jumped me from behind. They didn't know where I had come from. They didn't know what I was overcoming. They didn't know what I was fighting for. They didn't understand me. They didn't know anything about me. They didn't know the fight that was going on inside of me, what I was running to, what I was coming to. They underestimated everything. They didn't know me. They didn't know my desperation. They didn't know my motivation. They didn't know why I would even snatch the man out of my car, even though he had a gun. They didn't understand or know anything. And yet it ran on the news over and over again as I lay in the hospital. And this woman got shot because she had the nerve to try to fight somebody off. She tried to fight a winless battle. Well, it was my life. It was my car. It was my future. And yes, maybe it was my dying. But there. It was all my decision. And I don't regret one moment of it. So anyway, in sharing that with you, I've experienced trauma. I've experienced more than one threatening situation in my life. I have become a statistic in more ways than one, just as many of you are. And sometimes the events haunt me, but I manage them now. They don't manage me. Let me share some statistics with you. Do you know that more than half of all women will be exposed to at least one traumatic event in their lifetime? Yes, it's true. And it states by the National Center for PTSD, that in fact, research has been published showing that women experience 10 to 12% more PTSD compared to men who experience it at a level of 5 to 6%. Do you also know of all women reporting any traumatic event that nearly all of them, or I should say more than 90%, have reported multiple traumatic events in their lives? That's an extreme number. And probably many of you all fall into that number too. And saying all of this, do we need to be blamed or victimized twice over? Do we really need to hear the criticisms and the knee-jerk reactions of the onlookers? I think not, and I know not. According to USLegal.com's definition, victim blaming is a devaluing act where the victim of a crime, the victim of an accident, or any type of abusive maltreatment is held as wholly or partially responsible for the wrongful conduct committed against them. Victim blaming can appear in the form of negative social reactions, not just from the legal world, but believe it or not, from the medical and mental health professionals that treat us, as well as from media and immediate family members and friends and acquaintances that should be supporting us. It goes on to say that victim blaming has emerged in racist and sexist forms also. And the reason for victim blaming can be attributed to the misconceptions about victims, the perpetrators, and the nature of violent acts. Neural Launch's editorial team writes in its article entitled Blaming the Victim, Psychology Unraveling the Harmful Phenomena, says victim blaming is the actual act of holding the victim responsible for their own misfortune rather than acknowledging the role of external factors or the perpetrators themselves. It is a psychological mechanism that allows people to distance themselves from the uncomfortable reality that bad things can happen to anyone at any time. This phenomena is far more prevalent than we might like to admit, but it happens. And it seeps into our everyday conversations. It seeps into media portrayals and even legal proceedings. The courtroom can be the most brutal and terrifying place to relieve a trauma. Yes, I've gone through a lot, and I know I'm not alone. I've been there in court as a victim and as an observer, and it's appalling. And that's why I feel the need to host this broadcast. Victim blaming creates a toxic environment where survivors are hesitant to speak out, perpetrators are emboldened, and society as a whole becomes complicit in perpetrating cycles of abuse and injustice. It's a psychological trap that we all too easily fall into, often without even realizing it. Are you a shifter? Do you know what a shifter is? I've been a shifter, even as a victim. Can you believe it? A shifter is someone who blames the victim. Yep, I've done it because I realize that I don't want to be a victim. I don't want anybody else to be a victim. And when I see something that could have been avoided, I want to say to the victim that they shouldn't have done that, they shouldn't have gone there. And I know I'm reminding myself of what not to do and what to do. Shame on me. But think about it. Have you ever caught yourself thinking that this person shouldn't have been walking alone at night? Or maybe they should have known better than go to the ATM at night or at a specific location? Or maybe they should have known better than to trust a specific person? You know it's real. Come on. It's very real. And scientists actually have a name for it. They call it the precipitation theory. It means the victim is subjected to judgment by their own attributes, where people overemphasize the victim's attitude, habits, personal characteristics, traits, and looks, and actually ignore the situational factors that contribute to the cause or the event when explaining another's behavior. When we fall prey to this bias, we more are likely to attribute a victim's misfortune to their own actions, to their own character, their own flaws, to their own decisions, rather than considering the broader context or the action of others or the actions of the perpetrators. We see it in commercials, guys. We see it in announcements. We hear it on the radio. We see it in self-defense ads. We see it in self-help classes. We hear, don't be a victim. You're not a victim. You're a survivor. Don't be a victim. Be empowered. But even when they say you're a survivor and don't be a victim, well, how can you be a survivor if you weren't a victim in the first place? There's a subliminal message in all these announcements and all these advertisements. It's a lot of pressure. Subconsciously, there's a burden lying beneath all those messages to make sure it doesn't happen to you. And if it does happen, it means you weren't prepared enough and that you're at fault. Being a victim seems to have become such a four-letter word because it speaks to weakness, unpreparedness, carelessness, and perhaps vulnerability. And who likes the word vulnerable? Even that seems to be a four-letter word these days. It lends itself to fault-finding. So nowadays, we have to be perfect, we have to be powerful, we have to be prepared, we have to be ready, we have to be ready for everything. We have to be ready so it doesn't happen to us. We have to be ready so we don't become a statistic. No, of course, nobody wants to be one. No, we don't want it to ever happen or ever happen again. So don't you dare become a victim. Don't you dare be victimized. You have to be a part of the smart club. You have to be one of the wise ones. You have to set yourself up for never being set up to be a victim. And after saying all of this, after sharing all of this, I guess many of you have questions, like I have, about how do you heal? What do you do? And how do you move on? Let me first describe, as I continue, the impact of all the victimizing, all the blaming. It's psychological. There's an article posted on the U.S. News Health website. It's called The Psychological Impact of Victim Blaming and How to Stop It. It's authored by Michael Schroeder, a former writer. It states many victims of abuse suffer secondary trauma from being blamed for the harm they endured almost without fail. It states when a person has been the victim of abuse, psychological experts say that the individual experiences shame, internalizing some of the emotional and mental injury perpetrated, and that's in addition to how the abuse or the crime, such as physical or sexual, may have also marked a person physically. Yep, we are a culture of victim blamers. The article adds that those who suffer sexual abuse, especially from young children to predominantly female students on college campuses, are frequently blamed for what happened to them. The core of victim blaming is that we don't want to feel out of control. Since being victimized or learning that someone else was victimized threatens to shatter the illusion that we're always in control of what happens to us. Victim blaming is endemic in our society and can worsen symptoms of anxiety. It can increase shame, It can leave a person more disconnected from their own feelings, as well as make it harder to connect with other people and ultimately stand in the way of recovery. At the basic level, a most basic level, experts say a person needs to be free to feel the way they do and affirmed by those who love them so they can process their feelings. We need to be validated. Victim needs to be validated. It's also important for a person seeking help to find a mental health professional they can trust. It is recommended that a victim of a violent crime or any traumatic event find a therapist, one that you can feel comfortable with, because it's an extremely personal thing. The idea is to form a relationship with a therapist that is familiar with your type of trauma and is able to work with you through the trauma and all the subsequent results of the trauma. I agree wholeheartedly with this article. If you have ever experienced anything traumatic, you are going to feel how you feel, and no one can tell you how to feel. You need to walk through this yourself. You need to walk yourself through it all. And you need to find someone to help you do it. I have. And you need to ignore the blamers. It is your situation. It has to be processed. And it has to be processed without the voice of the victimizers and blamers. Being bombarded with the victim blamer narrative can seriously damage one's mental and emotional health and even compromise the way of life and compromise relationships. It can change one's self-image. It can bring more harm to one's self-esteem, to one's self-respect, and cause a person to question their own integrity and character. So if you are a victim and you're suffering and can't seem to cope effectively, I want you to find help. The writers go on to mention that there are 5 stages to PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and that if you're stuck, I want you to check these out and see if you recognize yourself in any of them. I'm going to list them briefly, but if you want to learn more about them, you can go to the website choosingtherapy.com and look up the article, The 5 Stages of PTSD, Understanding the Process of Healing. It defines PTSD as a mental health condition that can develop after someone has experienced or witnessed a traumatic event. It's more than just feeling stressed or anxious after a difficult experience. PTSD involves persistent symptoms that can significantly disrupt a person's life. Some of the symptoms are flashbacks, nightmares, avoidance of specific places, people, or activities that are reminders of the trauma, negative changes in thoughts or mood, like feeling detached or hopeless, or increased arousal. Sometimes, like being easily startled, feeling intense, having difficulty concentrating, having difficulty communicating, are all symptoms of the traumatic experience. It says PTSD is a long-term effect that occurs when the body and mind have trouble processing that experience, leading to those ongoing symptoms. Not everyone who experiences trauma develops PTSD, but it can be a serious condition for those who do. The first stage is the impact stage or shock. The second stage is the denial stage, when you're trying to minimize the event. The third stage, is the recoil stage, when intense, intrusive memories pop up in our waking or sleeping moments. And the fourth stage is called integration. It's where you can finally articulate and better express what has happened. And the fifth stage is called the recovery stage. It's the stage of growth after the event, when you feel you've stabilized and are able to move forward and no longer are dwelling or living in the event itself. So with this and the experience of being blamed for what has happened to you, or from being held partially responsible or the cause of whatever traumatic event you've experienced, I want to remind everyone listening that Jesus heals. His heart is not to condemn, but his love is there to make us whole. He is the perfect judge and the lover of our souls. He is a perfect friend, and he knows the truth about every situation we experience. He knows our every emotion and our every thought, our every contemplation. He knows how we're going to react to every event before we even react. He knows the end from the beginning and the beginning from the end. He knows the hows and the whys, and he is the voice that matters. His voice is the voice of love. So I hope and I want every listener, every woman, to shut out the voices of condemnation and doubt and listen to the voice of the one who loves you, Jesus. I want each listener to practice shutting down the voice of the perpetrators, the victimizers, the blamers, and even our own voice that can be self-condemning and overly critical. I'm going to share a little history of a woman in the Bible. In this history, you'll see how Jesus shuts down the voice of the accusers, of the victimizers, of the blamers, the voice of condemnation, and even the woman's own voice that may have screamed of unforgiveness towards the men and even of herself. This woman was being judged and condemned to a stoning for being an adulterous woman. Naturally, the men made no mention of the man who was committing adultery with her. Of course not. It was a clear case of how even today, women are treated more harshly than men, treated with a double standard, and are shamed for falling victim to crime or even stumbling along life's journey. The story is referred to as a woman caught in adultery, and it's found in the Bible in the Gospel of John, chapter 8. It says, "At dawn, Jesus appeared again in the temple courts where all the people gathered around him, and he sat down to teach them. And as he was speaking, the teachers of religious law and the Pharisees brought a woman who had been caught in the act of adultery, and they put her in front of the crowd." Imagine that. "Teacher," they said to Jesus, "this woman was caught in the act of adultery, and the law of Moses says to stone her. What do you say?" You see, these men, these teachers, they were actually trying to trap Jesus into saying something they could use against him. But Jesus only stooped down and wrote in the dust with his finger. But they kept on demanding an answer. So he stood up again and said, "All right, but let the one who has never sinned throw the first stone." Then Jesus stooped down again and wrote in the ground. And when the accusers heard this, they slipped away one by one, silently, beginning with the oldest, until only Jesus was left in the middle of the crowd with the woman. Then he stood up again and said to the woman, "Where are your accusers, woman? Didn't even one of them condemn you?" "No, Lord," she said. And Jesus then said to her, "Neither do I. Go and sin no more." You see, these men didn't even expect Jesus' compassion, and of course they didn't want his admonishment. Jesus knew the evil in a woman's attacker's hearts. Jesus knew their intent, and he reminded them of their own filth and of their own sin. He did not berate or belittle this woman, but yet he reminded the men that they have also sinned. You see, he didn't condemn her at all. No one is perfect, and we all stumble. So how dare anyone judge anybody? How dare anyone judge any victim? With all of this being said, you want to know, how do you move forward? You want to know, how can you move forward? How can you overcome the traumatic events when you find yourself reliving them? Events that are raw and painful. You may be craving revenge. You may be trying to overcome the blame. You may be living in bitterness and anger. You may be listening to the voices in your head or the other voices that provoke you to anger. I want you to meditate on some verses. They're found in the Bible. And the first one is in Leviticus chapter 19, verse 18. And it says, "You shall not take vengeance or bear a grudge against the sons of your own people, when you shall love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord." This is a beginning to healing. This is a beginning on the road to recovery. In Romans 12, verse 19, it states, "Beloved, never avenge yourselves. Never avenge yourselves, but leave the wrath to me." You see, we're not to be unforgiving. And you may be saying, "I've got to pay them back. They deserve it." You may be saying, "There's no way I can forgive anybody who's done something so cruel and so evil." But we must forgive. Despite the outrage that we feel, we cannot let the desire for revenge, we cannot let hate seep in. So stay with me as I continue. Hold on and don't let your anger right now turn you off. In Luke chapter 6, verse 27, it says, "But I say to you, love your enemies and do good to those who hate you." Yes, keep listening as I walk you through the damage of unforgiveness, the damage that unforgiveness does, the damage that bitterness and hate does. Let me share with you the benefits of forgiveness and the benefits of not seeking vengeance, of not feeding the fear and the anger. First, I'm going to describe what unforgiveness does to our own souls and to our bodies. So please pay attention and try to detect if you see yourself in any of these following things. 1, do you have lingering anger or resentment? 2, do you find yourself reliving the offense where you may feel stuck in a loop that you can't seem to stop? 3, do you tend to have negative thoughts or feelings? Maybe you regularly have thoughts and feelings or dreams about the event or the person. 4, are you living in avoidance? If you know the person, but you actively avoid the person or avoid being where they might be, or avoid situations that remind you of the offense or the trauma, bringing up past hurts that are unrelated to the trauma could be really damaging. Being in the environment where you experience the trauma can be damaging. Are you one of those? Or are you a person that is constantly triggering other people, causing arguments and creating conflicts that have nothing to do with your trauma because your anger is spilling over? Are you creating drama that has nothing to do with what's happened to you, but we know that it's truly the source? Or finally, do you find yourself plotting or daydreaming about revenge? Do you hear yourself in any of these? I know I've seen myself in some, and I'm going to describe what unforgiveness does, what it actually is. It's poisonous. It's poisonous to your mental health. It's poisonous to your spirit. It's poisonous to your body. There's an enormous physical burden to being hurt and disappointed, says Dr. Karen Swartz. She's the director of the Mood Disorders Adult Consultation Clinic at the Johns Hopkins Hospital. Chronic anger, she says, puts you into a flight or fight mode, which results in numerous challenges and changes in your body. It affects your heart rate, blood pressure, and immune response. Those changes then increase the risk of depression, heart disease, and diabetes, among other conditions. Now, her study also shows that forgiveness calms stress levels, leading to improved health. Additionally, studies have found that the act of forgiveness can reap huge rewards for one's own health, lowering the risk of heart attack, improving even cholesterol levels and sleep. Mind you, reducing pain, blood pressure, and levels of anxiety. Research points to an increase in the forgiveness health connection as you age. So you see, medical doctors say forgiveness is necessary to live better and to be better. Forgiveness and praying for those who harmed you can actually help take the edge off of your anger, rage, and sadness. I know it may be hard for you, but I know it helps. I've practiced it. So, exactly what does forgiveness look like? How do you get there? What does it mean? It certainly doesn't mean to forget, as people often say, forgive and forget. But let's continue and see what Psychology Today says. Forgiveness in part says it is a willingness to drop the narrative on a particular injustice, to stop telling ourselves over and over again the story of what happened, what this other person did, how we were injured, and all the rest of the upsetting things we remind ourselves in relation to this unforgivableness. It's a decision to let the past be what it is, to leave it as is, imperfect and not what we wish it had been, and not what we wish it had been. Forgiveness means that we stop the shoulda, coulda, woulda beens and relinquish the idea that we could create a different, better past. Forgiveness is for everyone. Forgiveness for the Christian is a biblical necessity. God tells us in Ephesians chapter 4, verse 32, that we're to be kind to one another, tenderhearted, forgiving of one another, as Christ forgave us. In 2 Corinthians chapter 2, it says, anyone whom you forgive, I also forgive. What I have forgiven, Jesus says, indeed, I have forgiven anything. If I have forgiven anything, it has been for your sake. And in continuing, it says, so that we would not be outwitted by Satan, for we are not ignorant of his designs. That's a quote by the Apostle Paul. In Colossians chapter 3, it says, if anyone has a complaint against another, forgive each other, as the Lord has forgiven you. So you must also forgive. And next, and very powerfully, it says in Luke chapter 6, do not judge, and you will not be judged. Do not condemn, and you will not be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. And that also means we're to not to condemn ourselves, We're not to judge ourselves. We're not to condemn anyone or judge anyone, but be kind and loving to ourselves and to others. So in closing, I'm not ignoring what has happened to anyone. I'm not ignoring the level of hurt or the level of trauma. I'm not ignoring the voices of anxiety, the voices that condemn from wherever they come from. But I want each one of us to turn off the unforgiveness, to turn off the noise, to shut down the blamers, the victimizers, and turn to forgiveness. Forgiveness is not saying you were not hurt by what the other person did. Forgiveness is not saying your pain is gone. Forgiveness is not saying you're back to being the person you were before it happened. Forgiveness is not saying life can now pick up where you left off. You feel the way you did before, as if what happened never happened. No, it's not saying that. Forgiveness is not saying you no longer believe the other person was responsible for causing harm. Forgiveness is not saying you excuse the other person's behavior. It's not saying you no longer view what happened as important. It's not saying it wasn't traumatic. Forgiveness is not saying you share the blame for what happened, and it's not saying you can never forget what happened. And it's not saying you can never forget it ever. What it is saying is, despite the trauma and the blamers and deflectors and the gaslighters, is that forgiveness is necessary for your health and a must for the believer. It's a must for everyone. I want all of us to be on the road to recovery. I want each one of us to take a conscientious step-by-step walk to healing. I want us to remember above all that Jesus loves you. Yes, Jesus loves you. He says so. His love heals. In John 15, we can hear Jesus speaking. As the Father has loved me, so have I loved you. Abide in my love. It says in Psalm 36, how precious is your steadfast love, O God. The children of mankind take refuge in the shadow of your wings. In closing, my awesome listeners, my awesome women, please try to focus on forgiving. When pondering the betrayal, when pondering the beating, and reliving the attempted murder, or remembering any person who traumatized you, or remembering who it was that tried to take your life or victimize you in any way, even if you're not Christian or not believer. Most people understand the concept of forgiveness and the need to forgive and how important it is to move forward. So I ask of you to work on forgiveness, work on moving beyond the trauma. Yes, work on forgiving. Make it a regular part of your daily life. And I do believe you can slowly see your levels of anger, depression, and anxiety decrease over time. In the Song of Solomon, chapter 4, it says, you are altogether beautiful, my love. There is no flaw in you. Until next time, be blessed and let truth and love drip into your soul. God bless you.
I've been running for so long through the valleys where shadows stay. My heart grew cold, my spirit weak, but deep inside I heard you speak.